Hey, and welcome. Today we're going to be taking a look at classic Doom on the PlayStation Portable, the original PlayStation handheld console. If you've been watching on the channel, you will have seen recently I have been looking at various fan source ports which have taken classic Doom and put them onto consoles where we didn't officially get releases. And this is Doom on the PlayStation Portable in all of its glory. It's actually a very interesting port, but the music here, I just want you to take a quick listen to. It's interesting because a lot of these fan source ports that we've been looking at have had real issues getting the music to work, so having any kind of music playing over classic Doom is a novelty in terms of what we've seen so far. That being said, the sound quality isn't of the highest. You can hear it gargling and sometimes crackling, and I assume that's just because things haven't been fine-tuned under the hood here, but what we do have here is a very impressive package. This is a very smooth experience if you're looking for classic Doom on the go. Remember, the PlayStation Portable was released around the middle of the 2000s, competing against the Nintendo DS. And playing Doom on handhelds at that point was limited to the Game Boy Advance officially, so getting full-fat Doom like this on a handheld would have been really amazing. Looking into the development of this fan source port in particular, it looks like a version of this has actually existed for quite a long time in the PlayStation Portable homebrew scene. A lot of people were playing this back around the time PlayStation Portable was a hot product, so it's really cool to see that the Doom community was represented on PlayStation Portable even at that early stage. And you have to say that the PlayStation Portable here is doing a marvellous job of running this. There's no real hitches or hiccups or anything that really would make this unpleasant. When playing on some of the other fan source ports, you've seen how the performance has been hindered by the hardware that it's been put on. But with the PlayStation Portable able to handle 3D graphics to a certain extent, Doom really shouldn't be that much of a problem. And you can see that I'm moving around pretty smoothly here. You can actually use the analog stick if you really want to. I personally am choosing not to, just because it's a bit too sensitive for my liking. But if you want to play with the analog stick on the PlayStation Portable, you definitely can do. Controlling this version is actually really fun. It's giving me a lot of PlayStation original Doom vibes, in that a lot of the movement when I'm battling enemies is kind of being thrown to the shoulder buttons for strafing, and the face buttons are kind of very similar in the way that they operate. So if you like the original PlayStation's control style, then you'll probably enjoy this a lot. Like I said, the analog nub, I know it's not really an analog stick, but I'm going to call it an analog stick. It's not really the best suited for this. Unfortunately, unlike the PlayStation Vita, the original PlayStation Portable only has one analog stick, so dual analog controls are definitely not in here. And because of the layout of it, it's not the best suited for trying to replicate that using the D-pad. In my opinion though, you can get along just fine. We'll dive into Doom 2 here, and this gives me an opportunity to talk about just how flexible this fan source port actually is. So, with a lot of these fan source ports, I've found that yes, you can play custom WADs, but usually you've got to do a lot of the heavy lifting yourself, and sometimes there's compromises. With this, that is not the case. As long as it's Boom compatible, it seems like the custom WADs and levels will run perfectly fine. And with Doom 2 here working, then it pretty much opens the door for a lot of the Doom 2 mods and WADs from around this time to actually be included. Seeing this running this well, it really does make you wonder why this was never considered for release on the PlayStation Portable. It kind of seems like a match made in heaven. I understand that the PlayStation Portable had some impressive 3D games going on around this time, but I still think there was a lot of room for Doom, especially because there really aren't that many great first-person shooters on the PlayStation Portable, and I think Doom would have really slid in well there. You can kind of hear the music warbling a tiny bit as well, which seems to be a sort of distinctive feature of this. Let's kill all these enemies here. So now let's take a look at TNT Evolution here, and much like Doom 2, there is a lot of optimization that's gone into this because you won't really notice that much in the way of performance issues. The only issue I have run into is that because changing your weapons kind of relies on you pressing triangle and the shoulder button, sometimes that activates the cheats. And I'll show you the cheats in a little bit, but basically how this version handles cheats is they're kind of baked into certain button prompts, much like the original Xbox version. And much like the original Xbox version, sometimes you can accidentally activate cheats and it can be a little bit frustrating. Around this time I think they had the Doom Classic Collection, which had all of the retail releases of Doom. I'm pretty sure they could have found a way to get that onto the PSP with something like this quality. Take care of the chain gunner there. We'll take out the zombie men here. One of the more interesting things I see whenever I make videos about these fan source ports is some people ask, well, what's the point of even looking at them? They're irrelevant. Here's the thing. it speaks to just how inventive and how creative the Doom community is, that when a console comes out, someone is willing to make a version of Doom that makes it playable, even if its software doesn't do it themselves. And I think that just speaks to how great Doom is, that people are willing to jump that far over hurdles to make it happen. And it's important to have context as well. In the mid-2000s, playing Doom on the go, you couldn't do that outside of the Game Boy Advance. It was never brought to the Nintendo DS, it was never brought to the PlayStation Portable officially, and when you kind of look at this, it makes you wonder, why was it never brought to the PlayStation Portable? This is a great way to experience Doom, and this is really, really fun. The fact that you can get these games running, and the fact that you can experience this is pretty great in my opinion. Now, one thing I want to do here when we've killed these imps, I actually want to show you how the cheats work in this version, because this version kind of has an interesting way of handling cheats. Instead of inputting buttons and sort of doing long combinations, you basically can cycle through the cheats and activate whichever one you want to do. You can even activate cheats like no clipping, which is not really possible on other versions that we've seen. And what this means is that you can kind of mess around with these games in ways that would not be possible on like the Game Boy Advance version, for example. We can give ourselves power-ups, we can give ourselves weapons, keys, we can no-clip, or make ourselves invulnerable if we really want that. And again, it's all about choice and options, and it means that every Doom style of play is being catered to. Wow, I really got shredded there. But of course, with TNT, we have to talk about Plutonia. I'm not going to hang around Plutonia too long here, just because obviously Plutonia, we've all seen it, we all know it runs, and at this point you kind of get the idea. I'm going to just let you enjoy the ambience of Plutonia on the PlayStation Portable, just so you can hear that music a bit more. And yes, if you're curious, you can actually get Sigil to work. You will need to use the compatibility version of Sigil. And interestingly as well, this is the only sort of official / unofficial WAD that I'm playing here that doesn't actually have any of its music present. I know that Sigil has its fans, so being able to play this sort of on the go and being able to sort of experience this on the PlayStation Portable is actually really, really impressive, even if I'm about to get shot in the face here. One of the more standout features of this whole package on PSP for me is the fact that you can actually load in custom WADs very easily. And when I say it very easily, what I mean is as long as you've got the Doom 2 WAD set up, the source port will actually do all the heavy lifting and make it all work pretty seamlessly. So all you really need to do is dump your WADs into a folder and it will do all the work for you, which means you can play things like Memento Mori here. And that's really cool because when I did get this running on the PlayStation 2, it had to be done in sort of a compromised way, so you didn't quite get the full experience. But here, you get not only the music, and wobbly music at that, but you also get the custom textures that come along with this WAD. It's really, really good stuff, I'm not gonna lie. By the way, if you've never played Memento Mori and you're a relatively new player to Classic Doom, I do recommend giving it a shot. It's a bit old hat these days, but it's still a good time. I will probably get around to doing a playthrough of this on the channel at some point. I also just wanted to quickly show off Memento Mori 2 here. Memento Mori 2 has a lot more custom textures and things going on, so this is actually probably a better showcase for just how adaptable this source port actually is. Again, when I tried to get this running on PlayStation 2, there were a lot of problems, so this is actually pretty fun to see that around this time you could actually experience custom WADs on the go on PlayStation Portable. I'm really not very good at shooting the imps behind the walls there. I also just kind of want to showcase that you can actually do something that I haven't done since I played Doom back on DOS in the day. You can actually intermix WADs and have a play around with kind of the look and feel of established WADs. So here I am using Dystopia Freeze texture WAD file, and I've put it into Final Doom here. It's all very simple. It's basically pick it from a menu and drop it in. And what we get here is a slightly modified take on TNT Evolution. Let's take out the enemies here. I did try to push things a bit further with this source port because I was really impressed with things. Unfortunately, getting the total conversion of Batman from the 90s to work was a bit too far for this one, unfortunately. As you can see, performance-wise, it's pretty much unplayable, and yeah, I didn't expect this to work, but I had to give it a try, and you can see here, I think we've kind of hit the limits on what this is able to achieve. But there is one final thing I want to show off here, and of course, it's nuts. Yes, if you are feeling particularly spicy, you can get nuts to run on PlayStation Portable. As you can see, the enemies are kind of flickering in and out. The limits of what the game is willing to show us here is pretty much on show, and I think it's going to crash in a second because the whole thing is just kind of falling apart. It's crashed. But you can get nuts to run. It's not very playable, but the fact that it runs at all and the fact that it doesn't immediately set fire to your PlayStation Portable is an achievement all to itself. But let me know in the comments what your thoughts on all this are. Would you have bought Doom on the PlayStation Portable had id Software brought it to that console? Do you think this is an impressive port, or do you think that stuff like this is just not that impressive? Let me know in the comments, and thank you so much for watching.